I think Azreia has actually done an excellent job of that. I mean, you guys have gotten people out. We've gotten involved with the governor prior when there was the moratorium and other things to make sure that, the single families are being impacted, protected. Because there's a huge difference between like my large clients that may have 400 doors on a single site and an Azreia investor that maybe owns 3 properties. If one of those residents don't pay, you got a very different problem than you do on the multifamily side. So I think Azreia does a really good job of that. It's really just getting the information out to the members because there's a huge volume of people that would otherwise be unrepresented if it wasn't for Azreia being the voice of the industry.
You're listening to The Azreia Show. If you're looking for quality real estate investing information that you can trust, you've found it. Stay tuned and join the tens of thousands of members that have already benefited from Azreia, your home for education, market information, support, and networking opportunities that will advance your real estate investing career.
Hello, great state of Arizona and the Azreia family. We are blessed to be here to do another episode of the Azreia Show. I'm Marcus Maloney and our co-host,
Mike Delpree. Hello.
And today we have Zona Law with Mark Zinman. How you doing today, Mark?
Good, you guys. Thank you so much for having me. Mike,
Yes.
Marcus, good to see you.
Not a problem. So we're going to talk all things legal. So let's kind of get started. Let's just jump right in, Mark. So
Let's try not to bore the people with law.
How long have you been an attorney? Kind of what's your background as far as real estate attorney?
Sure, yeah. So I've actually been doing this, I guess now, probably about 17 years, a little crazy.
Okay.
Just hitting my 17th year this year. Graduated law school 2005, was living in New Orleans, came back here after law school and kind of jumped right into doing this stuff. Seems kind of out of nowhere, basically. Yeah. It's a weird area of the law, but I've loved it. I mean, it lets us to really work one-on-one with clients, which is great. It's kind of the best part I like is helping them grow their business.
So what brought you from New Orleans to Arizona?
I actually grew up here.
Okay.
Undergrad, I kind of did the jump through the country. Undergrad at Wisconsin, law school at New Orleans, and then head back.
Got it.
Okay.
And did you start your own practice right away, or did you work for somebody?
No. So when I was coming out of school, I was trying to figure out what I want to do, right? Like in law school, they don't really tell you what the real world looks like. Kind of same way real estate is. Yeah. They're like, just go do it. And you're like, okay. So I was trying to figure out, do I want to go to a big firm or do I want to do a small firm where I can kind of do a different level of, involvement? And so I met who is now my partner, Scott Williams. He's been doing this about 30 years. Started working for him a couple of years. Then I was a partner. Then we took on another partner and kind of just kept
adding the last names.
Exactly. Truly, I mean, that's actually what happened. And finally, the most recent merger was we had like 2 different firms. We had Kogemeyer Law Group, who's Matt Kogemeyer, an excellent attorney, been doing a lot of landlord tenant stuff for years and some PI as well. And we had ours, which was Williams, Zinman, and Parham. And I was like, we can't take this many names. It's going to sound ridiculous. So the state bar allowed you to start using trade names. So that's when we came up with Zona Law, and then just make it easy for people. Website's name's easy. They remember it's easy. It's just kind of, we use Zona.
Yeah, I like your guys' logo, everything you guys got going on.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being a business associate with Azreia. So that's one plus, right?
Oh, it's been great. I think we've been with Azreia now since 2012. So I'm literally probably hitting 10 years now.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. So what are some of the services you guys provide?
So for all the Azreia members, I mean, the basic landlord tenant, kind of your evictions, your fair housing issues is a big one, security deposit litigation, and then a lot of the transactional stuff. Clients come to us for documents to understand just, hey, I'm trying to wholesale. How do I do it? What am I doing? I need the disclosures. I need a lease. I need to be able to do an option. And so we try to walk them through those kind of processes.
And do you guys provide any leases? Do you guys provide documents to members, or is there anything you guys do along those lines?
Absolutely, yeah. We have documents, certain standard ones. Most forms we just give out to Azreia members for free.
Got it.
We have discounted rates also for Azreia members for like our lease option, which obviously is a bit more custom. We have to work with clients on that. And so anything that we on a regular basis do, we have pretty much forms for it to help keep it cheap.
And I know you guys were a big benefit during the moratorium and everything like that, and you really, really helped the members. So kind of where are we at right now with all of that?
No, I appreciate you saying that. The moratorium was the weirdest thing I'll hopefully ever live through. It's never good when you're in the eviction business and they say you can't do evictions.
Right.
So 2 years of quiet time in our office. And most of that time was really just spent advising clients of what they can and can't do, right? We weren't even billing. It was just literally, hey, get out as much information so that landlords are able to do the right thing. Right now, we've finally kind of gotten back to where, at least in the eviction world, landlords have their rights back. They're able to, enforce their leases the way they're supposed to. all the moratoriums have kind of gone. The only thing we really have left over is just kind of some court rules, hoops that we have to jump through. We have clients that we see maybe once every 5 years. So they'll send us over like the 2 pages that we need to start an eviction. I'm like, that worked 5 years ago. Now the court requires this whole stack of things to get from you to kind of walk you through it. So we're kind of getting back to normal though, but obviously the Arizona market and real estate's gone crazy.
Yeah. So is all the moratorium stuff just done now? Is there anything lingering or anything anyone should know? Or
no, there's nothing lingering in terms of the moratoriums or anything like that. There's definitely just more of national attention on what's going on here with real estate, with evictions, landlord-tenant matters. There is moratoriums in other states, which I think is important to know, because there's a real big shift of what's going on. I'm obviously politically involved, but across the country, there's a big eye on landlords, and Arizona happens to be one of those states that people are tracking real closely.
How come?
Yeah.
Why? What are some reasons? Or
Don't hold back. Come on, let us know.
There's obviously, you guys know, there's a ton of people here, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more people coming every single day. I think they're estimating it's like 200 people a day are moving here.
Exactly.
We've been underbuilt as a state since 2011, which means every year we've gone into a hole, which is what's causing rents to go up. This year we're in the legislative session. Legislative session is open. I think it's going to be a long session, but I think there's been 4 or 5 bills proposed on rent control this year alone. The stuff you guys see in the newspaper, immediately that goes to the legislatures and they're like, oh, well, how do we fix these kind of issues? It's going to be an interesting legislative session with what we're dealing with right now, but the election in November is going to determine where we go as a state.
It's funny you say that, because even just in my daily conversations outside of real estate, family, friends, and just where we're at, can't the government stop the rents from going up? Like, that's a kind of normal, probably from the media. Like
100%.
I'm hearing a lot more of in just normal conversations. It's kind of nerve-wracking.
People are very accepting of the idea of rent control. We always joke during the moratorium is like, obviously all evictions were stopped at that time, and people understood it as it appeared generally that they seemed okay with it, but you would never. So people are okay with not paying their landlord but being able to stay in the property. The flip was they never went into a grocery store and were like, hey, can you give me groceries, but I can't pay you for it. The government may do that. And we're now kind of seeing that with the rent control concept, because it's being pushed really hard, which is, okay, maybe rent control is not a bad idea, but then you never go to a grocery store and say, hey, don't charge extra for the milk, or don't, let's cap gas prices, those kind of things. But I just published this morning or today on just on LinkedIn, a random thing. There was an article, Minneapolis or St. Paul actually passed rent control in November. Literally, it was a voter initiative in November of last year, 21. Since that, between December and March, so literally immediately, development in St. Paul and the pipeline of permits has dropped 80% year over year.
Wow.
Which means nothing is going to get built in that sound, which means eventually rents are going to skyrocket. And it's just a really bad idea.
Man, I think you did say something years ago that's always stuck with me, is vote. Like it was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you're just like, vote now, because who you're voting for now is going to determine what happens in a couple of years from now. Is that right?
I'm just impressed somebody was listening to me on stage.
I was listening. We're all listening, man.
I appreciate that. That's true though. Like, it doesn't matter to me where you are politically, whatever it is though, put your vote on them. That's what it is. If you're for rent control, sure, knock your socks off, go vote for that. But if you're against it and you're into investing and like, this is your bread and butter, this is your retirement, vote. Don't just talk after and complain about how things are done. This is your chance to actually make a difference. And I think that's an issue.
Very true.
So what are some things, being here, we're in April, right? So what are some things that we should be looking at as landlords coming up in November?
Well, so right now, so the way it'll work in the legislature, right? So the legislature is open right now. They're proposing bills left and right. It'll probably close. It's going to be a long session because there's a surplus in funds this year. Let's say May, June. And those will be the bills. It appears that everything's kind of going to stay status quo. There'll be nothing significant change. But in November, we have elections for governor, secretary of state, a number of important statewide positions. And that'll determine whether you go, purple, blue, red. And that'll affect then the 2021 23, I guess next year, legislative session, when that opens up, that's when potential for rent control and all these other issues will affect. And just simple things for a lot of the Azreia members. Like, we're so used to doing a 5-day notice for non-payment of rent. Well, there's a bill to change that to 15 days.
Oh, wow.
Well, if you're trying to, collect from your resident and you're trying to pay your mortgage, that
half
quick
the month
change
is gone, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it makes a huge difference. People always kind of forget that whatever happened to the legislature directly affects real estate. Like, there's no delay, there's no lag. It's just, okay, we changed our practices.
Wow.
So what can we do as real estate investors? You said vote, go out and vote, make sure we vote. But is there anything that we can do as a sounding board to help inform our associate members or just the general public?
Yeah, no, I think Azreia has actually done an excellent job of that. I mean, you guys have gotten people out. We've gotten involved with the governor prior when there was the moratorium and other things to make sure that, the single families are being impacted, protected. Because there's a huge difference between like my large clients that may have 400 doors on a single site and an Azreia investor that maybe owns 3 properties. If one of those residents don't pay, you got a very different problem
Right.
than you do on the multifamily side. So I think Azreia does a really good job of that. It's really just getting the information out to the members because there's a huge volume of people that would otherwise be unrepresented if it wasn't for Azreia being the voice of the industry.
Awesome. Thank you, man. So I had a question going back into evictions, or Marcus, do you have anything on
No, go
this?
ahead.
Okay. So you guys focus on evictions. So is there anything with rents going up? Are you noticing more evictions or anyone trying to stay in their house, or are you noticing anything unique happening?
Yeah, so we're at a point right now, obviously, so everything now is a tract, and they're even being reported now on a monthly basis from the courts. So year to date, we're still about 9% below where we were pre-pandemic, because obviously the
Okay.
pandemic hit,
Mhm.
evictions
Right.
were stopped, so they fell off a cliff. So you kind of compare where we are now to 2019. We're still down about 9%, and people are like, "Oh, there's evictions are rising." Well, yeah, they're rising. They're getting back to normal. But what people are so beyond blind about is they want to keep saying, "Oh, it's bad press," but pushing that issue. We're below at 9% still, and in that same time, we've picked up 500,000 new people that have moved to Arizona.
Wow.
So
Right.
our actual per capita has dropped even
Dropped,
significantly. It's just the sheer volume because we have so many people that are coming here. So what I see is a lot of clients are working with tenants as much as possible.
Yeah.
There's a ton of rental assistance out there. There's still literally, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars available for landlords. Any Azreia members, I think a lot of them just don't think that the money's going to be paid to them.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stress that enough. Just go out and apply, have your tenants apply.
Is it for the tenant? Does the money for the tenant, or is it for a fund for the landlord, or are they separate?
No, great question. So it's money. The tenant has to apply for it, but it's money that's paid to the landlord.
Yep.
And so I'm literally seeing clients that are getting 10, 20, 40 grand in rental assistance for tenants that haven't paid, literally on single homes.
Wow.
Where like if you have a single home and your rent is $2,500, $3,000 a month, the government's paying that up to like a year in certain cases.
Wow.
Well, I was a beneficiary of the rental assistance. I had
Okay.
I had a tenant that couldn't pay, and yeah, it was a seamless process.
It's
And
amazing.
yeah, and they sent me a check, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
Take it.
So
It's the
yeah.
greatest thing you'd ask for. I mean, that's what I always said during the moratoriums. I was like, don't stop evictions. Just if the government wants to cure the problem, let the government
Let
pay.
exactly.
It works for everybody. Government will pay. Landlord gets the mortgage
Mhm.
covered. Tenant gets the rent covered. It works. It was just the stopping the evictions, denying landlords the rights. That was the problem.
That was the problem.
But that's great to hear. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Yeah. So thank you for all of the information that you put out, to the members.
Yeah. Wasn't there a chart months back that they only released like 20% of that fund? Is that
Yeah.
still the case?
Yeah, we're still tickling up. I think we're at like 35%
Okay.
of all. I think it was like $500 million, some insane amount of rental assistance that came into the state. And they're about, I think 35 to 40% has been released
All right,
now.
it's getting better. It's getting up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it was a lot of misperception because the landlords didn't know, do I apply for it or do the tenants apply for it? And that was the thing is you have to notify your tenants and make sure the tenants apply for it. So that was one of the things that we did was we notified all of our tenants that was having issues paying their rent and gladly assisted.
Yeah, and that's the way to do it. I mean, I think that's kind of going back to what you guys do at Azreia is tell the members to go do those things, right? It's just
Mhm.
knowing is, okay, my tenants are back for a month. If I can find out, I can just give them the information, they can go apply, and then it's money in your pocket. It's great.
Right. And the benefit for me was it wasn't even properties that I own in Arizona. These were properties that I own elsewhere.
Really?
But because of the information that you shared with the Azreia members, then I said, okay, well, let me look in this other state because I know it's national. It's
Yeah.
not just in Arizona. And that's what we did. And we had our tenants to
Oh, wow. Cool, man.
That's
do
amazing.
it. So thank you, Mark.
Awesome.
Where's my cut of that money?
Wow. So what about, because when you'd come on every month and give us an update during COVID and we'd do polling, right? It's how many people are actually vacant or what's the occupancy rate? And it looked pretty good, were people paying rent through Azreia members, the polling.
Absolutely.
So what was the overall, looking back now, was it that bad? The people not paying rent?
No, I think Arizona did remarkably well. I think collections rates were very strong throughout the entire pandemic. I think part of that is landlords were working with tenants. Part of it was there were so many people moving here. Even when there was the moratorium, I think people still got that concern of, if I got evicted,
Yeah.
I'm out of luck. So
Yeah,
they really tried to pay. And then the rental assistance was kind of the final icing on the cake just to keep the money coming in, which is great. I mean, honestly, when I talked to clients originally, they thought you're going to be billions in losses, which it wasn't, which is great. I think my concern now is that since there's been an eviction moratorium once, is that something the government would do again? And that's my
standard.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So now we talked the whole COVID eviction. So you guys obviously specialize in evictions. So what are some things we can give some new investors, some tips we can give new investors about, their first rental property? Maybe they're having trouble with a tenant. What are some processes they should look into just to kind of protect themselves?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, what I see, especially with Azreia, is not realizing, and the two of you guys know this, but like the first person that comes in and just jumps in and buys a rental property, right? They don't realize that they just got into a new business.
Yeah.
It's not just like an asset you own and it just sits there and suddenly it's truly passive income. That's kind of a misnomer and everything. You guys hustle, right? Like it's part of the job. But I always say it's no different than you go and buy a McDonald's. Like you're gonna have to know how to make a Big Mac. Well, if you're renting out a property, you better know that if something happens, what your obligation is to fix it. Or if your tenant's delinquent, how do you invoke your rights? I mean, if a water heater goes out and there's mold, well, I hear mold every single day. It doesn't scare me. And you guys as well, you just have to go
remediate.
Exactly. Fix the problem. But I think too many people jump in, not really a business. And as long as they can get their policies, procedures set up, get their basic documents set up, all of that, it's great.
Got it.
But that's what's missed, I think, on people that just kind of step into it and don't have any idea what they're getting into.
And do you guys consult for that, or is there
Absolutely.
a package or something that?
I mean, my preference obviously is just to have a client come in, Azreia members sit down, kind of go through all of the big picture kind of things that they'll run into. I think it's a good idea. I think going to your guys' courses is critical, frankly, just to give them the basic information of what they're doing.
Yep.
Because I think the real estate's amazing to me, and you can do it really well. You just have to know what you're doing.
Very important. Research.
Yeah. So if someone was going through an eviction right now, or they have a tenant in place that's squatting, not paying, what would be the first steps? What would be the steps? Let's give some steps for people to follow in order to get that person out.
All right.
Step one would be called Zona Law.
There you go. I was going to say, you teed up that too well. No, we actually just did. So we have a podcast, obviously, just more on the legal side of things. It was big during the pandemic because to kind of keep people updated. But we're rolling out for management companies on our multifamily side, really different series, some on fair housing. We just did one on evictions, which is the only reason I mention it. It's like kind of a 3-part series. Your pre-eviction, what you do during the court, and then after as well. But right off the bat, it's giving notice, right? I think the hardest thing people think with evictions is because nobody likes to do evictions.
Yep.
Like we have a lot of business on it, obviously, but it's not something you're like, oh, I love to go do this kind of thing. You do it professionally and just realize that's the only remedy a landlord has if something's gone wrong on their property. Like if a tenant's breaching, tenant's causing problems, smoking in the property, disturbing everybody else, all it comes down, the only thing a landlord can do is an eviction. So they have to know that. You can send notices all day long. It doesn't do any good. You file an eviction. So in Arizona, you have a cure notice, which is, for non-payment, 5-day, non-compliance is a 10-day, serve it. And if the problem isn't cured, the next thing you're going to be doing is rolling into that eviction.
So go back to serving. So it's, I hear multiple things.
Yeah.
Hand, knock on the door. Like, so what is my question, right? Do you post it on the door? Like, is there certified letters? There's all these different things I hear. So what's the proper way?
Yeah, no, I love the question because that's probably the most common mistake people make, which is the easiest thing, which never makes sense to me. In Arizona, we have only 2 things that's really kind of guaranteed as valid delivery. One is certified mail, which means it's deemed received 5 days later. So even if the person never picks up the mail, which most people don't, it's as if they actually got it 5 days later. So that's fine.
So save that receipt that you get. Okay.
They don't have to sign for it, anything. They just literally, the fact that you sent it certified is valid. And number 2 is hand delivery, which literally means, Mike, I'm sticking it in your hand. If you don't want it, I'm going to throw it at your feet. Posting on the door doesn't count. I have so many emails. A ton of, and like I say, a ton of Azreia members will ask me that question. They'll like send me a file in. I'm like, okay, well, how'd you hand deliver it? They're like, oh, I posted it on the door. And I go, great. Well, it's not really hand delivery. You have to hand deliver it. They're like, well, I took a picture of it. I was like, well, great. You took a picture of a door, but it's still not a person on there getting that notice. So those are the 2 ways: hand deliver it, and truly certifying for the $4 or whatever it costs now. Just send out. There's no reason. Judges hate when people come in and they're like, well, they fight over whether their person was hand delivered. It's like, why wouldn't you just save yourself the hassle?
Yeah, just $4, send it,
and you're done.
Keep the receipt.
Yeah.
Wow. One thing I learned about that process. So I had a situation where at a multi-unit where everyone was supposed to be month to month. Come to find out, they, basically they stopped paying. They wouldn't pay rent. So I did my notice, served them, went to court, and they showed up with 1-year leases, all of them.
What?
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh shoot, this is not good for me, anyway. So I was like, so I told the judge, I was like, hey, how do we know these are even real? But he was like, that's another story. So I was kind of stuck,
That's horrible.
Yeah. So he basically said, well, to all the tenants there, they all grouped together,
to play the game.
And they're like, he's like, well, do you guys have your rents? And they're like, no, so that's what saved me.
Oh.
They didn't even bring their rents.
Yeah.
Too. But in that process, to say all that to say, estoppel. Can you talk about that and the importance of that in your inspection or wherever it may be?
So you're saying when you're buying a property?
Yeah. If I had done the estoppel process before I bought it, I may have avoided that situation. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah. People don't realize in any real estate with single family home, multifamily property, if you buy it, you take whatever subject to whatever rights the people have that are in that home. And so we see this a lot. So we represent, even back through the recession, we represent a lot of the companies that do buying a trustee sale, a lot of investors, a lot of wholesalers. And so they all kind of come with their own different thing. Yeah. But people are like, oh, well, I bought this property. I need the person out. So my first question is, well, what are they doing in the home? They're like, I don't know, but they're there. They're in my home. I'm like, well, they might have a right to be there. You can't just say get out. And so we've seen it all. Literally, I've seen clients buy properties only to turn out that the person in the home had like an option to buy it at a lower price. So if you buy it for $350 and it turns out, Marcus has got an option at $250, you better believe he's exercising that option and you're stuck.
So wait, and you don't have to record an option?
No, well, potentially you'd have to record to have it effective against a buyer. Okay. Or again, even in that case, I think Marcus would actually have a pretty strong argument because again, you have constructive knowledge. He's in there. It's your job as the buyer to figure out what he's doing in there before you close.
Great information.
Wow. So, and unfortunately, we have seen that a lot of the times, though, not that extreme. It's more often that the person's in there and has like a 2-year lease or like a 3-year lease. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm sitting for the next couple of years. And then the question is, okay, what's if their rent is $600? Yeah. That's kind of starting right on that buying the property and you're at a loss day one.
Yeah.
So I always suggest whenever you're buying a property, no matter how good the deal is, go talk to whoever it is. Ideally, it's the former owner that's in the property and you just kind of proceed to get the possession back. But anytime it's an occupant, you got to figure out what their rights are.
You still have to be thinking about that option agreement, man. I was like, wow, that's tough. We interviewed someone that had a situation where they bought the house from the lady and they had forged the deed. Like she had her cousin that was a notary and her boyfriend signed the house over and he bought the house from the lady.
Yeah.
But he was like, then they asked him to leave. And he's like, what do you mean? It's my house.
This is my house.
Yeah.
I've got one of those on my desk right now. Not a joke.
Wow.
See that all the time. It's kind of, that's the one benefit of trustee sales, right? The trustee sale, at least for clarity, the trustee's deed clears title, wipes everything.
Okay, great.
As long as you're buying a first position. You buy a second position, it's a whole different game.
Wow. Are you seeing a lot of transactions? Are you up on that? The trustee sale, is it active or?
It's definitely not what it ever was.
Yeah.
We lived through the Great Recession and kind of that business was incredible at that time. So no, it's definitely different. It's still small numbers because there's so much equity obviously out there for property owners. You just see what we see as deals, more random locations, less in Phoenix, less,
outskirts.
Yeah. Prescott, anywhere other.
Wow.
Issues.
Cool stuff, man.
This episode of the Azreia Show is brought to you by Azreia Business Associate, Zona Law Group. Zona Law Group handles numerous real estate matters with a focus on landlord-tenant law in Arizona. For more information, visit their site at zona.law.
What else we got?
I don't know.
Well, we should start playing Stump the Attorney. Let's see.
That's what I'm thinking.
Trying to think of some questions. No, but we were talking earlier about the bills going through. We were talking about the wholesaling one, which is obviously a possibility. Was that?
Yes,
2747.
HB 2747. So before we go into that, so what we're noticing is in other states like where Marcus is from, Chicago, I think Oklahoma, as well, like just making it illegal wholesaling real estate. So. Is there any other states I'm missing? They showed like a pipeline.
Those are the two right now
And
currently.
there's few in the books in the pipeline going to happen. So
I didn't know that they'd done that in Chicago. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Chicago hates landlords, property owners.
Yeah, Chicago is a litigious state, so everything, well, Illinois is a litigious state, so it's everything for the entrepreneur, the business owner is not favorable.
Yeah.
When it comes to landlord tenant rights, it's always skewed to
Yeah, I don't think they allow and I don't think they do evictions during the winter.
No.
Like you can't
No.
physically
There's
get somebody
snow on
out
the
because it's
ground.
considered
Yep,
a hardship.
because it's a hardship. Exactly.
wow. So let's talk.
And tenants understand that, and they know these laws, so they'll pay their rent all the way up to November, and then won't
First
pay,
day of snow.
Yeah, then won't pay rent until April.
That just happened, not that specific, but in Cleveland, the tenant, I guess, if they feel the tenant feels that the landlord's not fixing something, or they feel like you're a slumlord or whatever, they can take their rent payment and bring it to the court until the court
Releases it.
and figures
Wow.
that out. So yeah, so I had to deal with that. But they didn't pay them rent before, so the
Yeah.
court didn't accept it because they didn't pay the month before either.
Yeah.
But it's a game, like you said. They
Mhm.
understand. Some people understand
It
the
is.
game, but we don't have that here.
No,
Right,
right now we
which is
don't, which
good.
is good, obviously. But I think that's where, that's why people take money. I mean, a ton of my multifamily clients took money out of California and dumped it in here.
Mm.
The thought process
Mhm.
was you have rent control there, you have longer eviction periods, it's a more miserable process. And that's why, we'll see what happens with Arizona, because it's going to be a question of whether investors keep coming here or they skip over here and go to Texas or go somewhere else.
Yeah. So now with Arizona and the wholesaling, so what do you think about that? First of all, like, do you think that's even what's something that can even happen, making wholesaling illegal?
Yeah, I don't see making wholesaling illegal. It doesn't even make any sense to me at all how you could make it illegal anyways, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just literally you're a party to a contract, you turn around and then sell the contract. It's basic contract rights to me. It's a private issue. I know that like disclosure, we can talk about in a second, that sure, notify the parties to the transaction. I can see that happening. For years here in Arizona, they've been pushing, there's been numerous bills proposed to actually make wholesaling covered by the DRE, by the Department of Real
Right.
Estate. So you'd have to have a license to wholesale. But again, traditionally, it's actually exempt because you're a party to the transaction. In wholesale, people don't do it without realizing is that you're actually, hey, I'm going to buy this property. I may have a back door to get out of if I want, but I'm buying the property. I'm putting my $5,000 down. I'm then going to turn and try and sell off my interest to somebody else. So you're in the game for the $5,000. And so the department, I think in past years has tried to get involved in that. It's never really gone anywhere. So I think they're trying to kind of come to other ways to get involved in wholesaling.
Which is the HB 2747. So it's mainly. So what did you read from that when you just looked it over?
Sure. Yeah, it's basically a lot of bill right now that's in the Senate to require that wholesalers, and again, how that's defined, how that's controlled, because it's never really been defined properly in the past, would have to give certain disclosures when buying a property. So if they're, if I'm coming to you, you've got a property on the market, I come to you and say, hey, I want to secure it. I'll give you a $5,000 down and, my option to do whatever I want with it. That the wholesaler would have to put certain disclosures in there. Frankly, I think clients should be doing that now anyways, because let's be honest, people are litigious across the board.
Yeah.
If somebody thinks that you skimmed an extra $20,000 out of the deal that shouldn't have been there, had they realized they'd gone to market entirely, well, they're going to claim fraud against you that you hid it from them.
So, and that's one of the things that they added in the AAR contract was, because everybody would say we'll buy it as is, cash and everything like that. So that's why one of the addendums for the as is was in there to make sure that the property was as is, clarify what as is. And then as far as the purchasing it cash, it's now, okay, you have to show us the certified funds that the cash is there readily available. So wholesalers can say, well, I have cash, but can't really prove that cash is there.
Yeah. And the as is a great point as well. I think a lot of Azreia members on the sell side, don't realize that just because you sell something as is doesn't mean you're suddenly
Right.
entirely off the hook. As is means you've told them everything. And if there's any hidden defects, you don't know of them either. Because you can still get sued for hidden defects, even if you had an as is, if you knew that there was a problem and you failed to disclose it. So always across the board, disclose as much as possible, just because everything ends up in litigation otherwise.
Yep, those are 3 words in the agent arena that we always have to say: disclose, disclose, disclose.
Exactly. I think that's just as important as location.
Right.
So is it? Do you think it's more like agenda driven by like a National Association of Realtors, like to get, so wholesalers are not in the business kind of thing, or to get their license? Do you think there's anything along those lines?
Yeah, I thought it was a push originally years back when I saw it. I thought it was a push to get people licensed.
Yeah.
So that they got control, whether by the department or anybody else. But yeah, the newest bill I think is evidently to protect people so that you have the disclosure side of it. And you don't really know a lot of times what people don't realize with legislative stuff. It literally could be a legislator that happens to live next to a friend, and the friend had a bad deal. And so they go to their neighbor and they're like, can you believe this? And the guy's like, okay, well, I'll run a bill to kind of prevent this from happening.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So unless you sit down, you never really quite know where the impetus starts.
My thought, I always think about, so I'm like you mentioned a little bit earlier, like someone's found out, oh, wow, I could have made 20 grand more. So now this wholesaler is fraud, right?
Yep.
But now I'm like looking at the real estate world. So look what's going on. First time home buyers buying houses as is,
waiving all contingencies,
getting that new homeowner to go 10, 20, 30, 40 grand higher to buy this house over appraisal. And then they go get an award at their office. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, am I off track? I don't get it. So.
No, what's happening is truly unbelievable. I mean, we saw the waiver of contingencies, and when that first started coming out, with our market got hot, I was like, this isn't going to end well, because people are going to get into the house, be like, oh, I got my contract, I'm so excited. And then they get into the house and they're like, oh, now we got problems.
Yep.
Like, okay, well, that's when people start suing each other, even if they, they're so happy to get that house.
Yeah.
And then there's problems. They're,
yeah, they're willing to overlook everything.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's with, and I go back to Illinois because of the wholesale. I call it the wholesale law, but that's what they had to do in order to wholesale in Illinois. You had to become a licensed agent. You had to be licensed professional in order to do it.
It's crazy. I didn't know that was a real thing. That's mind-boggling. I'm not surprised it's coming out of Chicago, but it is.
Yeah, I know.
Crazy.
So HB 2747 is just disclosures. Doesn't make wholesale illegal. You can still do it.
Absolutely.
Right,
And I think there's a counterpart as well on the flip side, where you're actually then selling it off, limiting, explaining what your interest in the property are. And truly, we advise clients to do that now.
Yep.
Like any of our larger wholesalers that have websites, we put in there, disclose that you have an interest in the property. You're not actually owner of the property that day. I mean, there's a big difference, but people just don't realize that.
Great stuff, man. So at Zona Law, what else you guys do, man?
So the basic today, like day to day, obviously we're in court a lot on evictions, helping a lot with, the larger companies, policies, procedures, kind of setting up the fair housing issues, do a lot of training for clients. And then we litigate out kind of the quiet title, the disclosure things that we're talking about right now. We're kind of limited in what we can take. So we're selective in those cases just because it takes a lot of time. You got to, when we commit fully. And those cases can go on a long time. We've got a couple of those quiet titles where investors, weren't sure what they were getting, those kind of issues.
And in this podcast probably won't be out yet, but Mark's going to be doing a fair housing presentation at our monthly meeting this upcoming Monday. So what about in that world, right? So there's got to be a lot of changes in society with fair housing. Yeah,
fair housing is probably, from Azreia members, if there's one thing I could tell them besides the whole, McDonald's, this is a business thing, is that fair housing is real and they need to comply. I think a lot of Azreia members, unfortunately, just overlook it because they're like, oh, I only own a couple properties, probably not going to get dinged for something. And so they kind of just are more relaxed with their policies, which sounds great. But the problem is, you do something just on a hunch of whether the tenant's going to be good or not. Like I always go back, I've heard this for years, Azreia guys would joke, some of the members would show up and be like, oh, well, when I'm renting out a property, I just look at the guy's car. And if the guy's car is good,
we just talked about that.
That stuff scares me. I trust me, and I know that stuff. And you tell that to the attorney, and the attorneys get scared. So I know it sounds great, but the problem is, realistically, you have that person, you reject them because of their car. They file a fair housing complaint because they're white, they're black, their race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, and disability. And you're like, I just looked at their car; it doesn't look good. That's just not a great standard. Right. Like, what was their FICO score? You're like, I have no idea.
I don't know.
I just saw a lot of rappers in their car. So people think they're being clever, but it scares me as the attorney, because that's where, fair housing, they just want people to objective criteria. They either meet your criteria. I always tell clients, a tenant should be able to come into your office, hand you their application, you give them your standard, and they should know whether they're going to qualify for your property.
Okay, so is there any overarching tips about fair housing that landlords should understand and know?
Yeah, for the most abused one we're seeing now is assistance animals, of course, right? People want no pets in their property. you have to accept assistance animals if they have a doctor's note confirming the person's disabled and they need it to use and enjoy the animal.
Can you continue your pet fees?
No, can't do pet fees. Can't charge pet rent.
Wow.
Can't charge pet deposit. It's literally, people have to think of an assistance animal as a wheelchair.
Got it.
Which is kind of weird because, there's so much abuse of it. People just throw a vest on a dog and suddenly they've got an assistance animal.
So let me ask you that, Mark, because now you can pull those certifications from offline and everything like that. How do you validate if this animal is truly an assist animal, or should we not try and validate it? And if they say it
Good
is,
question.
Yeah,
just go with it.
No, it's an excellent question, because that's the hardest thing. I think the most common thing I guess I see in fair housing, right? Because everybody's got their Fido, and you're like, oh, I want no pets, and suddenly Fido is this, assistance animal that it never was 2 days ago. So you can ask for certain information. What you're allowed to ask for is medical verification that the person is disabled and that they need the animal for the use and enjoyment of the property.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, fair housing is much more broad than a lot of the laws, like the ADA for public areas, airlines. I get bore you guys with all this stuff. Basically, everybody else only has to allow service animals, which are miniature horses and dogs. Whereas for fair housing, it's broad as can be. So you could theoretically have almost any animal if a doctor signs off on it. What we've seen for years and years is just the certificate. It's kind of like what you're talking about, which is, hey, I went online, I paid $50 for a certificate, and now I get it. You can question those. So that's probably not by a medical provider. Usually that's like a CEO of the company or chairman is registering this dog. None of that's really real.
Okay.
So medical.
It's kind of like a prescription. Like if a dog, a psychiatrist, anybody's like, hey, this person needs it, they get it. Okay. That's different than I paid $65 for a card and a vest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
the
first tenant that told me that was years ago. I was like, stump me there, man. I didn't mind it, but I may have done the whole pet fee thing. So I probably got to check into that.
Yeah. And with fair housing, I mean, truly for Azreia members, I don't care if, and I say this to all my clients actually, but Azreia specifically, I don't care if you don't know the answer. Just realize it's a fair housing issue and say, hey, let me talk to my attorney, get back to you. That's all you need to know.
Awesome. So what else? So we get to the pets.
I did see a chicken this year, by the way, as an assistance animal.
It's pretty popular. Chickens are pretty popular, I've noticed.
It doesn't go so well in an apartment though. So
Right.
We asked for additional documentation that never came.
Good one. All right. So fair housing, anything else on fair housing we should know? Any tidbits?
No, I mean, just literally create and this kind of goes back to the business structure as well, is just set up what you want. I don't care for my clients whether you want the best of the best in terms of your tenants or you're willing to be a bit more lax. Like I had a client once, probably one of the funniest conversations I ever had. It was actually an Azreia member sat down and wanted to kind of build the business and do everything else, but he had been in it for years. He just wanted to clean up everything. So we're sitting down talking about like what his criteria are. And so I'm going through the same discussion saying, look, you need to have an objective criteria of what kind of tenant you want. We go through it and he goes, I take sex offenders. And I go, what are you talking about? Why would you? Just as an attorney, that just gave me pause. I was like, why would you possibly do that? That's like usually the first box we check saying no sex offenders. He goes, they're the best tenants I've ever had. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, they can't rent.
They don't leave.
Else.
Yeah.
He's like, they pay rent on the first of the month. They never cause me a problem because they know if they get evicted, they have to go somewhere else. Trying to find another multifamily property is not going to work. So he's like, they're the best tenants I've ever had. They're quiet. They're perfect. And I go, fine with me. It doesn't bother me as an attorney. If that's what your standards is, as long as you uniformly apply it, great. On the other hand, if you want to be like, I need a 750, 800 FICO score, do that as well. But realize you're going to thin out the market of what's available.
Okay, so you can create your own criteria up front, establish it. Okay,
that's all I'm looking for clients to do is saying, give me the piece of paper, tell me what you want or what you don't want.
Got it. Wow, good stuff, man. Wow.
And then, do you guys have like a template or something like that for somebody to say, "Hey, Zona Law, I need to start a criteria. Where do I start at?"
Yeah, absolutely. We got one page, kind of the checkbox ideas that you want to go through, and we don't even give the standards. We just give the ideas of what you should think about, right? Like, do you want evictions? Do you want them to have a bankruptcy in the past? How much, collections, other issues that you can think of? Because, you're getting into a business with this person for a year, right? It's not just passive. That's your partner for a year for them to pay the rent and you get the mortgage paid.
So true. Awesome, man. A lot of great info today.
Yeah. So Mark, how can we get in touch with you if someone here in the state has additional questions, they want to reach out to Zona Law? Where can we go?
I appreciate it. So the website is zona.law. We tried to, when we did the rebranding, try to make it as simple as possible. Yeah. No .com, nothing else, just zona.law. We also have our podcast on YouTube, which, like I said, there's a lot of pandemic stuff and then shifting to now back to just the basic landlord tenant to keep
Okay.
people updated. And then the office phone number, it's as easy as 480-949-1400. We always take calls there. And then we also have our Tucson, but 480 is easy as can be.
Okay.
And also, right, and under the business associates at Azreia.org. And Mark is always at the trade show.
Yes.
The monthly meeting. You always have a booth. You're always there answering questions and helping out.
Yeah, and we always do the Q&A in the newsletter and the legal article as well. So
Always,
you can pretty much find us anywhere in the Azreia world.
Yep, that's true.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate you stopping by today.
This has been great to be with you guys.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we get everything out and let everybody know where to reach you. And successful show today.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. Guys, you know what to do. Go to Azreia.org if you need additional information about real estate investing resources, Azreia.org, and we will see you on another episode.
Thanks for listening to the Azreia Show with your hosts, Marcus Maloney and Mike Delprete. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you found this information valuable, head over to Azreia.org and learn more about our community.